right. Welcome everyone to the first fiber hemp production short course. We're super excited to have everyone here. My name is Shannon McDonald. I'm a research collaborator with the UVM Extension Northwest Crops and Soils program. I'll be assisting Laura with this course, and you can always reach out to either of us if you have any questions. Our team is located in Vermont, but we're curious where everyone else is from. If you feel comfortable, let us know where you're joining from today in the chat so that we can get to know where everyone is joining from. I think we have international folks. Yeah, it looks like we have lots of different places. Super exciting. Awesome.
I'll reach out that I'm in Las Vegas, but we grow in Iowa and work directly with the state of Iowa in hemp production.
That's awesome.
We presented to the state of Iowa about a fiber program. And we're U.S. Freedom Farms VF3.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. All right. So, as you all have probably seen, this is the schedule for the rest of the course. Today, we'll be going over what to consider before planting hemp for fiber and hear from our awesome guest speaker, Robin Destiche. And as a reminder, one certified crop advisor credit can be earned from each class session. If you want to apply for CCA credits, we'll show a QR code at the end of class. And of course, we want to thank our funder who makes this work possible. This class is supported by the Agriculture and Food Research Initiative, the Critical Agriculture and Research and Extension Grant, and the SUN Grant Program from the U.S. Department of Agriculture's National Institute of Food and Agriculture. This course is hosted through the Extension Foundation Campus online course portal. You can enroll in this course for free on Extension Foundation online campus and get access to all of the course materials, including recordings of class sessions in case you miss one or want to look back at a previous class. Now, I'll give you a super quick tour through this site so that you can know where to go for the rest of the materials. All right. Can everyone see that all right?
Yes.
All right. So even if you've never visited the Extension Foundation site before, you can just Google Extension Foundation Campus, and it comes up right there. All right. So if you don't have an account, you can come to this site, and the search bar right here, just type in fiber hemp. And our course is the second one that shows up, fiber hemp production in the Northeast. And if you don't have an account, you'll see this self-enrollment. Guests can't access the course, so you do need to have an account in order to access it. So just continue. Is this your first time here? You'll just scroll down, create a new account. Just have to agree. And then you'll fill in all your information to make an account. And you'll also have access to lots of other courses on the Extension Foundation campus that are also interesting. Our program has some other ones on dry beans, grass-fed dairy, lots of other things. So once you've made an account and you're logged in like I am here, you can come in and search for fiber hemp again. Click on the course. And then you'll be able to come in here, see the course schedule, and you'll be able to access the class recording once that's up, the slides, post-class survey. And throughout the course, we'll be talking about additional resources that you can access, and we'll link them all here. So it'll be nice and easy to have everything in one place. All right. So with that, I'm going to toss it over to Laura.
Hi, everybody. Hopefully you can see my screen okay. Welcome to our very first fiber hemp production short course. We're very excited to have you. My name is Laura Sullivan, and I will be your guide as we journey through all 4 modules of this agronomic exploration of hemp. I have been growing hemp for fiber with UVM Extension under the guidance of Dr. Heather Darby for 5 years now, and I've been working with hemp textiles since 2015. I also just completed my master's degree with Vermont College of Fine Arts, focused on bast fibers like flax and hemp. And to begin the class today, we'll be discussing all the things that one must consider before planting hemp. And there is a lot, so let's get right into it. Here is an agenda for what you can expect to learn today. We'll begin every class with a poll to make sure that everyone is wide awake. And then from there, we will discuss hemp broadly together to give us a mutual, broad, and basic understanding of the hemp plant. Then we will move into soil, field prep, and fertilization, followed by licensure and regulations. And to round out our first session, we'll hear from Robin Destiche of KonopiUS Seeds, who will talk to us in depth about seed sourcing and variety selection, and then join us for a live Q&A discussion. So first we'll start with the poll. And don't worry if you don't know the answer, but what are the 2 main components of the hemp stalk?
Is that a question we answer in the chat, or you want that out loud?
There should be a little window that comes up and you can get your answer or record your answer there. Did everyone see that? Looks like we got a bunch of responses.
And no worries if you're unable to fill it out. It's just to make sure that everyone's awake.
Okay. So
Will the slides be available after every session for weekly?
Yes. So the correct answer is bast and herd, just so we know. Okay, and there's the results. All right. Okay, so hemp, an overview. Industrial hemp, or Cannabis sativa L, is an emerging food and fiber crop in the Northeast. It is a non-psychoactive variation of cannabis defined by its low delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, content threshold of 0.3%. There are 3 general types of hemp that farmers might grow: hemp for fiber, hemp for grain, and hemp for flour. And this course will focus on growing hemp for fiber. And one thing that you will learn in this course is that there are many different ways to grow hemp, even within growing hemp for fiber. And we, alongside our guest speakers, will expose you to many different methodologies. And I ask you to bear in mind that growing hemp in the US is an emergent industry, and there is more than one right way to do it. And more importantly, the practice of growing hemp in the US will be iterative as we evolve our technology, tools, and skill sets. Hemp fiber raw materials, bast and herd. So here's the answer to our poll question. If you're growing hemp for fiber, the raw materials you are producing are called bast and herd. Hemp is a bast fiber plant, meaning that the fiber is found in the stalk. Other bast fiber plants include flax, nettle, jute, kenaf, milkweed, and more. So bast fiber is a term that describes fiber plants whose fiber is found in the stalk, opposed to a fiber plant like cotton, where the fiber exists in the seed pod. And because the fiber is found in the stalk, those fibers can be almost as long as the stalk is tall. So we can infer that another defining characteristic of bast fiber is a long staple length. And I happen to have some bast fiber here with me. And you can see that it also has a very long staple length. This is unretted bass fiber, just peeled off a green plant. So bass fibers have a long staple length as opposed to a short staple length fiber plant such as cotton. So right now, I'll ask that you all picture like a little tuft of cotton in your head, which is a fiber plant where the fiber lives in the seed pod. So it's quite different than a bass fiber plant where the fiber lives in the stalk. And as an aside, cotton can also have short and long staple lengths, but not on the scale of bass fibers. So where exactly is the bass fiber found in the stalk? The bass fiber lives in the outer layers or bark layer of the hemp stalk's anatomy, while the inner woody core is known as the hurd or hurd fiber. And I also have a piece of hurd here with me. The hurd element is really just like the plant's skeleton. It's a structure for giving the plants their vertical quality, but all of the strength associated with a hemp stalk belongs to the bass. If you're taking this class, you have probably heard that hemp fiber is very strong or high tensile strength. And now you know that this characteristic belongs solely to the bass fiber. I could break this piece of hurd pretty easily. And you can probably also see that it's hollow if I hold it like this. But bass fiber bundles are much tougher to break apart. And it's also important to mention that when growing hemp for fiber, both bast and hurd are of value, and whether your focus is one or the other will depend on your end use markets. And here's one more visual aid for you. This is a bundle of hemp stalks that have been halfway processed. So on the right side, we can see the bast fiber. On the left side, we can see the intact retted hemp stalks. And in the middle, we can see little white pieces of hurd that have splintered off during the manual crushing of the stalk. And now we'll go a little bit more in depth. We now know that when we are making textiles, we are utilizing the bast layer of the stalk. But what we don't yet know is that bast fiber can be further delineated into two grades, line and tow. Line fibers are the long fibers and tow fibers are the short ones. And each of these has their own value stream as well. So line fiber can be used for ropes, yarns, or textiles. And one thing that's important to understand is that line fiber is like the crown jewel of hemp's offerings. It's an artisanal product at the top of the pyramid of hemp luxury soft goods. From line fiber, you can make some of the rarest and most sought after textiles in the world. These are textiles that shine like silk and are soft to the touch and to wear against the skin. But these textiles are almost impossible to find in this day and age. And I was told by an industry leader that they are manufactured to this day in China, but they are not exported because they are bought up so fast by the elite class there. So the question is, why are they so rare? And the answer is staple length. So even looking at this one, it's folded in half. So this is half the length of these fibers. And these textiles require specific spinning mills that can accommodate their very long staple length. In the 1990s, the North American and Central American free trade agreements were implemented, and all non-perishable industries were moved overseas. This dramatically changed the way that we manufacture and consume clothing in the US, so much so that in the 90s, 50% of clothes worn in the US were made here, and now that figure stands at less than 2%. In 2026, we don't currently have the manufacturing capabilities in the whole entire hemisphere to commercially produce 100% hemp yarns. This is very important to understand, and yes, you heard me correctly. We no longer have the infrastructure to spin long line bast fibers, but what we do have are cotton and woolen mills. So if you want to make hemp yarn in the US, you must blend with cotton or wool, unless you're willing to hand spin it, in which case, let me know and I can help you with that. But I also want to say here, maybe you're listening right now and you're thinking, why would I grow hemp if we don't have the capacity to make our own 100% hemp textiles. And I'll just have you know that I am a textilian at heart, and I've spent a lot of time with this dilemma. And I've come to realize that while we might be a handful of years away from producing the textiles that I want to see in the world, there is so much more low-hanging fruit available to us when it comes to manufacturing products out of fiber hemp. And we need to allow this process to be iterative and emergent. And we'll see more industries come online once a few of them can get established. So moving on to tow fiber, which again are the short bast fibers. Tow fiber is well suited for non-woven applications such as paper, packaging, and insulation. And it's a common misconception that the use of paper is diminishing as we move into a digital age. And on the contrary, we're actually using more paper than we ever have before, and it has only become more ubiquitous in our eyes. So these are just some of the low-hanging fruits that I was talking about when it comes to manufacturing items out of hemp fiber. And we saw this diagram a few slides ago, but here it is again to help you visualize where those fibers live now that we have a better understanding of them. And to be certain, there is a third way to use bast fiber, which involves combining the two, so line and tow, into one value stream for cottonization. And I'll reiterate again, this is currently the only way to produce hemp textiles 100% in the US. Because while we lack infrastructure to spin 100% hemp yarns, we still have systems producing cotton and wool yarns and textiles. So it is possible to grow industrial hemp in the US and cottonize or woolenize it for textiles blended with cotton or wool. So just one more time, this is currently the only way to commercially produce hemp yarns in the US. You have to blend. Why? Because this is the spinning infrastructure that we have in place. I have emailed more than one clothing brand who was making claims on their websites like 100% linen grown and milled in the US, and have gotten them to change it after pointing out that this is 100% not possible at this time. But back to cottonization. It is either a chemical or mechanical way of processing hemp fibers so that they can be blended with cotton. For the most part, that refers to shortening the staple length, because remember, we are beholden to the machinery that we have, and machines need consistency and have specifications. And now I'm just going to tell you one more secret that our ancestors don't want you to know. And I'm also going to contradict myself. So listen, long fibers don't actually exist. They're made up of fiber bundles. And if you were able to, say, chemically treat fiber to refine it to its most elemental, which is pure cellulose, you would be left with many short fibers free of the natural glues that were holding them together. So you also lose some of the soul of the fiber and a lot of the strength that we associate with hemp fiber. But I'm just sharing this with you to help peel back the veil on the cottonization process. In a sense, you can think of it as overly processed hemp fiber, but it's also a positive way to transition ourselves into a more diverse fiber future. Because currently, 70% of clothes on Earth are synthetic, meaning they're derived from oil, which is extracted from the lithosphere, and the other 30% are mostly cotton, which is really resource intensive to produce. So it's a good thing to promote hemp into the zeitgeist in any way that we can, I think. And I'll also mention that it is possible to do this mechanically rather than chemically. And there's a company in Alabama called Basscore, which are known for their mechanical degumming process, which is what they call it. And we will talk more about this in future modules. But for now, just let the takeaway here be, you can make blended textiles in the US out of combined line and tow with a few extra steps. Okay, so hurd fiber. Hurd fiber can be utilized for a number of applications as well, the simplest of which would probably be mulch or animal bedding. But it is also suitable for hempcrete building material, composite board, or more technical uses like creating 3D printing medium. We will have more in-depth discussions on all of these applications with industry leaders in future modules. But first, I will just add that if one really wanted to maximize their material, they could also make combustible briquettes for burning from essentially the combined floor sweepings of the bast and hurd without the need to fully separate them out. But most all other applications would need bast and hurd cleaned and separated from one another. But let this be some food for thought for you as you imagine sweeping the floor in your future hemp factory, wondering how to save money on heating and use every last bit of the plant at the same time. Okay, so now we have a solid background in hemp stalk anatomy, and we will begin our agronomic discussion on preparing to plant, field preparation, and soil health. Fiber hemp is direct sown in spring, ideally after the last frost. Seedlings can generally be expected to outcompete weeds, especially when planted early. I do have, however, a little disclaimer to add, and that is if you are planting into a field that is established with bindweed, that is probably not the best place to grow hemp. Ask me how I know. Bindweed is a vining plant that will weasel its way into the canopy like no other weed can do, and there's almost nothing to be done about it, unless perhaps you're growing for biochar and where it's going to be incinerated anyways. And look, that's another use for industrial hemp. Soil tests should be conducted a few weeks before planting. Soil tests can be submitted to the University of Vermont Agricultural Testing Lab, along with a printable form and a check for $17. We have these links for you in the resources where you can find all of those. And when growing hemp for fiber, your field should be fertilized at a nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium ratio of 1 to 0.7 to 1.5. And your soil test is going to tell you everything that you want to know to inform what is needed to meet the desired ratio. Any amendments can then be added to the field as late as 1 or 2 weeks before planting. And for those of you who have grown corn, the fertilization needs of hemp are similar to that of a corn crop. And that is sort of our guiding principle as we navigate growing hemp with limited research available to us. And then one more note is to watch the weather when you plant, because the best conditions to plant in are right before a rain event. But that said, we have never irrigated our fiber hemp fields, and we have seen seeds germinate through severe drought conditions. And fiber hemp is not currently particularly vulnerable to pests and disease in the Northeast, but we could see that change in a changing climate. But one pest does need an honorable mention, and that is birds. Bird predation can be detrimental prior to germination. So this is just something to be aware of, and we can discuss different ways to prepare for that in the coming modules. And then the little guy in the video is not a pest. He is our friend, the mayfly, and hemp brings a lot of really cool bugs around to the farm. The bees especially love hemp. All right, so continuing on with variety selection. Generally, fiber hemp is harvested between 80 and 100 days. Depending on genetics, hemp grown in the Northeast can surpass 3 meters in height within this time frame. And I've included this picture on purpose to show you some of the cool traits of fiber hemp. The yellowing of the crop on the left is actually a genetic trait of French variety Fibroir 79, and it is supposed to look like that. It's not a nitrogen deficiency. And the yellow coloring is a trait unique to fiber hemp, but there are only a handful of varieties that have this complexion, and I just think it's really cool. So hemp is also a photoperiod sensitive plant, meaning that it will respond to shortening daylight hours by advancing into the later stages of its life cycle. But how it responds will be informed by its country or latitude of origin. Hemp varieties can be expected to perform consistently across similar latitudes because latitude determines day length. All this to say, variety selection is really important for end use. If you're growing for fiber, you're going to want fiber-specific genetics first and foremost, but more than that, you can manipulate your yields to be higher by choosing genetics that are late to flower in your region. For those of us on the 49th parallel, which is where the research farm is, these are generally varieties from southerly latitudes like China, Australia, or southern Italy. These plants will spend more time in their vegetative state than their northerly counterparts, meaning they will grow larger and for longer before they are triggered to express their flowers. Why? Because they are not as sensitive to a reduction in our daylight hours, and plants generally start to plateau in height once they express their flowers. It is also true that sometimes a single variety is utilized in different ways depending on where it is planted. For example, a variety bred for fiber in Canada might be utilized as a grain variety in our latitude because it would respond to our summer days, which are an abbreviated version of a summer day in northern Canada, by producing seeds much sooner than it would if it were planted farther north. And likewise, varieties that perform as fiber varieties for us could serve as a grain variety if planted closer to the equator because they would flower sooner there. And as an aside, if you wanted to grow hemp for grain, you would choose an early season variety, so one that's going to respond to changes in daylight hours immediately and flower more readily in fewer days. And I hope I haven't confused you too much right now because we're going to stay on this topic for a few more slides. Okay, so by now we are talking about selecting a variety for end use. Because hemp is suitable for a wide variety of markets, the genetic makeup of the variety is vital for determining what characteristics are expressed. For example, grain varieties tend to be shorter than fiber varieties, and CBD or flower varieties will feature branching or Christmas tree-like architecture that would be unfit for fiber production. Amongst fiber varieties, some are better suited for biomass production, while others are daintier or a more traditional choice for textile grade spinnable fiber. And when growing for a particular market, it is best to reach a consensus on variety selection to meet expectations on the back end. And on the right, I have provided us with some of the data from our 2024 fiber variety trial. And you can see that there is a correlation between harvest date, days to maturity, height, and if you're really good at geography, country of origin. But if you're paying really close attention, you might see New York on that list. These are two new varieties that were bred by Cornell in 2024 with a hefty percentage of genetics from China. And they behave like we would expect a plant from there too, meaning they got really big and didn't go to seed. And in a minute, we're gonna go into the field so you can see them for yourself.
So Alta. So this was one of the two varieties we had this year that was bred by Larry Smart at Cornell. And this is the super late one that I was saying we harvested it in the grain trial before it made seed because we just couldn't wait any longer. And it was just kind of like, at some point you have to say like, this variety doesn't work here because look, it's still in flowering. Like it does not have seeds. And we're in mid-November and that's just like not an option here to wait to harvest seed, because we've already had multiple frosts, so you can't count on a variety like this producing, like, and the weather cooperating with that too. But it still could be like a very strong fiber variety, in which case you don't need the seeds, and it's so big that it's obviously producing a lot of biomass for us. And these two, this one and Ursa Grande, both have like really heavy Asian genetics in them. You can tell just by the way that they get so tall, and the leaves are a little bit broader, and they're generally like really late to mature. So I'm just curious, like, this really makes me wonder, like, whatever the genetics were that made this plant, like, what is the climate like there? Because why are they able to stay alive in such like cold temperatures, and why are they so like unfazed by the photoperiod shortening so dramatically? They're just kind of like impervious to like the elements, and I find it impressive. I want to know what it's like where they're from.
Can you guys see my screen again? Great.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. So we just took a look at Ursa alta in the field, and you probably noticed it was very tall. So I'm showing you one more data table from our 2024 trial to point out the correlation between plant size, written here as height, and biomass yield, written here as dry matter yield. And what I want you to notice is that biomass yield increases with the size of the plants, not the number of the plants, which is written here as harvest population. We can see down on the bottom of the chart that Yuma yielded the biggest plants in height and stem diameter, and also the largest extrapolated biomass yields, and all of that is written in bold. So this is important, and I'll just repeat. If you're looking to maximize biomass yields, you're going to want bigger plants, which will be influenced by two things: your genetics, which we just talked a lot about, and also your seeding rate, which is a topic that we will get into in the next class. If you are not trying to maximize biomass yields, and you're instead perhaps a hand spinner looking to produce fine textiles, there are other characteristics written here on this data table that would catch your eye, such as stem diameter. And make sure you write this down, because it might be the poll question next week. The ideal stem diameter for high-grade textiles, meaning non-cottonized textiles, is 7 millimeters, which is about the size of a pencil or a chopstick. So the last topic that we're going to cover before we hear from our guest speaker of the day is that of licensure and reporting. Compliance is going to vary by state and certainly country, as I know we have a lot of international students on here. And in Vermont, our hemp program is at the behest of the USDA, meaning that we default to their compliance standards. Therefore, Vermont growers must register with the USDA using the Hemp e-management platform, which is an online portal. This is where you will apply for your license, manage your growing lots, schedule a sampling event, and file your annual report. And you'll have to trust me that it sounds like more work than it is. The user's guide has step-by-step instructions, and I have had good luck with speaking to a person when I've had any questions. The licenses are also valid for 3 years. So let the takeaway here be, please don't let red tape stop you from growing hemp in the US. If you're outside Vermont, there is a link you can access to see what the protocol is for compliance in your state. And I just wanted to show you guys some examples of the diagnostics that our varieties have produced. As a hemp producer, you'll be asked to have your crop tested once per season within 30 days of harvest. And these documents are what that looks like. On the left, we have variety Nationoid 15. And this is a French variety that was bred specifically to contain 0 THC so that it could be used to clean up nuclear waste through phytoremediation on a Superfund site in Japan, where there are very stringent THC compliance laws. And you can see that it did, in fact, live up to the hype, and no THC was detected in this specimen. And on the right, we have our workhorse variety, Futura 83, which is also French. And this is a variety that was very hard to get this past year because I was told France was not so keen to export this seed as they wanted to save it for the French auto industry. And I could not think of a French car, but maybe some of you can, so put that in the chat. But anyways, this sample tested at 0.05% THC, which is well within the limit of 0.3%. And in a minute, we'll hear from Robin Destiche of KonopiUS Seeds, who we source for the majority of our seed varieties. Robin is a passionate hemp entrepreneur. His hemp journey began in the Himalayas when he visited the local villages using hemp fiber and grain for clothing, food, and hempcrete. He then moved to Europe and learned to work more closely with industrial hemp. Robin works with organizations up and down the hemp supply chain, including the National Industrial Hemp Council, the Hemp Feed Coalition, and the American Society for Testing and Materials. He has a passion for service and communication that he brings to the hemp industry after spending over a decade in the tourism and hospitality industry. And over to you, Shannon.
All right. And if you have any questions throughout the presentation, just put them in the chat and we'll have time afterwards to answer all the questions. And there is no sound at this part, so that's on purpose.
Okay, so we are so lucky to be joined by Robin Destiche, a personal friend of mine, for this micro guest lecture. Hi, Robin, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Laura. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Could you please introduce yourself and share how you began working as a purveyor of hemp seed?
Sure. So I work with KonopiUS. We do seed import and distribution in North America, as well as abroad. I got into the hemp industry when I was living in Europe for 3 years, between 2020 and 23. They have a much more robust hemp infrastructure there in Europe, probably somewhere in the range of 125 to 140,000 acres. My partners that I work with are in France, which is the largest driver of that hemp industry out there, and discovered all the uses of hemp, so kind of got me into it. And from my point of view, it starts with the seed. So I was very interested with getting involved with the seed back in 2020.
Cool. And what would you say are the most important factors for farmers to consider when choosing genetics?
End use. You need to know who your buyer is going to be and what are the specifications that they need. And then you need to work backward from there. There's a variety of genetics out there for different purposes, and you want to make sure that you have the right variety for the right purpose.
And what do you think about how important it is to choose seed that is reliably available over consecutive years versus like choosing any seed that is available in the present?
Right. I think it's very important. If you're investing in a supply chain, you need to know that your seed is secure. As an importer, I can tell you this year has been very tricky with the current government in place. And as somebody who's bringing in seed from France, Trump is threatening an additional 10% tariffs on 8 European countries, including France. And so we had a hike on cost because of tariff. Now we have another potential hike coming as well. That's an impact. Seed coming in from China is already very heavily tariffed and may continue in the future. So we're working hard on domestic seed production so that we can avoid that and ultimately fill our own supply chains here domestically. It's very difficult to work if you're working in large volumes from one year to the next without knowing that your seed is secure. It's a very unnerving situation for farmers.
Great, thank you. So I'm sure that people on this call might not be familiar. So could you tell us a little bit about the difference between dioecious varieties and monoecious varieties?
Hemp is naturally dioecious, meaning that the male and the female are separate plants. You would generally see, a roughly 50-50 split in a natural field. Monoecious is a hermaphroditic plant, so the male and female sex organs are on the same plant, meaning that they are self-pollinating and that they can produce more seed. You can get more grain from a monoecious variety because you have more grain producers. Now that said, dioecious plants are generally hardier in their natural state, we have found. And from the seeds, from the plants that are yielding seed, you'll generally get a greater seed yield from a dioecious plant as well, but you just have fewer female plants in the field.
Great, thank you. So I know that you have experience with the hemp industry in other countries, and I know that other countries can be strict about what genetics are allowed. Is this true in the US as well? Are American farmers able to grow any hemp seed that they want? And what can you tell us about kind of the compliance in the US and all that?
Compliance. Yes. So countries' limits generally vary from country to country. In Europe, you have, say, Czech Republic, who's moved to 1%. The rest of the EU for decades was at
1% THC.
THC. The rest of the EU was for decades at 0.2. Now they've moved to 0.3. Other countries around the world are moving towards 1% adoption. Then you have, countries like Bhutan or Japan, where the threshold's 0%. This is very tough to achieve since the THC is a natural part of the plant's development. So to remediate all of that THC out of the naturally growing plants can be potentially detrimental. So from a regulatory standpoint, it's quite challenging, but it's challenging on the farming side. The seeds themselves don't contain THC. So we're able to move the seeds around the world because if you test the seeds, they're not going to have THC. It's going to be the biomass coming out of the ground. That THC is going to be in the flower material. So if you're testing flower material, this is where you could have a challenge. Here in the US, we're moving more towards what's been termed kind of fit for purpose, where the grower can be growing under contract and provide that contract to the local regulatory bodies to say that, we're growing this we're growing this hemp for, industrial purposes. It's not a cannabinoid grow, in which case they may be able to then get the permission to grow that seed. If you are grabbing feral seed, you very well going to see between 1% and 3% THC coming out of those plants. And if you're in a very strict state, you may have a problem at harvest. So I work in the certified seed world, so we know how much THC you can expect coming out of those plants. So the seeds that we work with are going to be compliant. And if you're working with, say Chinese seed, which can potentially be up around 1%, you can still get the permission to grow that. You just may have to go through another step or two to do so.
Great, thank you. And I remember in the past we had a cool conversation, you and I, about this one French variety called Nationoid 15, a French variety that was grown specifically to have zero THC to clean up. Um, was it nuclear waste in Japan?
Yeah, they were looking at remediating the soil around Fukushima.
Hmm.
Very similar to the stories you've heard, about Chernobyl and using hemp. Um, I haven't seen any studies or results from that yet. I
Hmm.
do know that seed has been sent to Japan for the study, but I am not sure where they are in that current study.
I just remember after you told me that we did have the Nationoid tested and it did test zero. So that was pretty cool to see in action. Okay, so can you describe in your own words why it's important to develop a domestic hemp seed supply and what some of the barriers to domestic development might be?
I think it's important to have domestic seed so that it's here and it's available for farmers when they need it. Right now, when we're bringing in foreign seed, we're competing against foreign businesses. China cannot get their hands on enough fiber. The European market demand is surging forward. Um, we've had inventory challenges the last couple of years due to the growth and demand going on in Europe. And so when we're competing against more mature markets, we end up coming up short. And when people come to us in April or May and say, I want to do a June planting because I'm in the northern geography, we're out of seed by that point. So working so far in advance can be challenging, asking people to pay, hundreds of thousands of dollars for their seeds a year in advance before their current year's crops are even in the ground is a challenge. So it would be very good to have seed on hand for when the farmers need that seed. Um, and to your second point, some of the challenges, hemp is a very fickle plant to handle. It requires harvesting at very particular times. You need to have the right genetics and the right latitudes and the right conditions. Um, it is not nearly as widespread and abundant as all of our other crops, such as soy or corn or wheat, where we've designed these genetics to be very successful in their different regions. We don't have a lot of hemp genetics. I mean, honestly, maybe there's 30 or 40 commercial genetics that are commercially available. And we are plug and play around the country, um, hoping that they work. So, we haven't done the due diligence on crafting these genetics to their particular geographical regions, which is coming. It will come in the future. When we think of this, we have to think of it in the long term. The soy industry, the corn industry, these took decades, 50, 60 years to develop. Um, Hemp's in its infancy, having, really just had its brakes taken off in 2018. So um, we're in a position to learn from our partners in Europe who have been doing this for decades. And, they coach us on, don't go too fast. Hemp takes time, genetics take time. The industry is going to take, years to develop still.
Great. I love talking to the seeds people because they always have their finger on the pulse of what's going on. So, for those who don't know, can you kind of like paint a picture for us about the global state of hemp seed and where we are right now and where we might be going in terms of what countries are emerging as exporters and which ones are pulling back for either domestic use or other?
Right. So the big puzzle piece in all of this comes down to processing. You have to be able to manufacture goods that the industry will purchase, and you have to do that at a price point that people can stomach. We can make very good hemp, but if I'm competing against cotton or pressed soy expeller, hemp's very expensive. So we have to continue to innovate on our production, and we have to continue to innovate on growing techniques that allow us to get more yield. Um, So the countries that have infrastructure for production are the ones that are going to move furthest, fastest, and quickest. And so we would look at China and Europe in this regard, as they've been doing it longer and they have more infrastructure capacity. The American market is moving forward. There have been some very large investments in hemp production, a la IND up in Montana, Panda Biotech in Texas, just to name a few. Um, we see developments going on in South America. There's a market coming forward in Argentina, in Colombia. We see interest in African countries, seemingly more in the coastal regions where the growing conditions may be a little better. China is the global leader in hemp production, continues to be, and I don't know if that's going to be slowing down anytime in the near future. We have sent seed to all 50 states in the country over the last 5 years. There's various agronomic testing going on to see which varieties are going to grow in those regions. So I would suspect we'll continue to see this growth forward. And you see it more in the Western countries. I spent time in India, where hemp is thought of as was termed to me God's plant. But they don't necessarily have the infrastructure for commercialization. So while you might have a country like that that's very eager to do more with hemp, due to their regulatory framework and lack of commercialization, they probably move a little bit slower. So I would suspect you'll keep seeing forward progress out of Europe, out of China, and America. And I should also mention, I forget our northern brothers, Canada. Canada has the third largest market in the world, built on grain, and they continue to be the largest grain producing country in the world, spearheaded by the food products that you can do with the hemp seeds, particularly protein. So the Canadian market, I think, will continue to move forward as well. And then we have, a Hemp Feed Coalition out there working very hard to bring knowledge to the regulators about hemp grains for feed purposes. I think this is a huge opportunity. My good friend Andrew Bish is the tip of the spear on that project. Wishing them all the best. It's going to take educators and regulators working together to open up some of these new markets that will potentially help our industry grow.
Great, thank you. And I can remember from around this time last year, it was a little bit trickier to get some of the long-standing varieties imported that we had been accustomed to seeing year after year. And I think specifically, we talked about how France was hanging on to a lot of their genetics for development in the auto industry. Do you think that's a trend that we can expect to continue in this upcoming year? Or is it just sort of like a volatile market and hard to predict?
We will continue to see demand in Europe. They are ahead of us on sustainability, on building materials, on nonwovens. And that demand and that pressure will continue. We're experiencing it again this year as well. While there is more inventory, that inventory is being swooped up pretty quickly. I can tell you that, we're in the middle of our imports right now, and we are competing with that demand from Europe. So I believe we'll see more production next year, a greater number of production, that is. It won't be too much longer, maybe a couple more years, and we'll start seeing a greater demand in America, and we can potentially be getting, some of these larger volumes over here sooner. But the hope would also be that we can start producing more hemp domestically as well. So we're not competing for the same supply against these other countries and continents.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so one more thing I just want to emphasize is for all of the first-time growers or interested parties who might be listening is just because a crop, a variety was grown well in, say, North Carolina, that does not mean that it would be suitable for a climate like Vermont. So if a farmer was interested in buying seed from KonopiUS, could they call and speak to someone about those sort of specific things, like which varieties are ideal for which locations, and get some consulting on factors like that?
Yeah, absolutely. We talk to a lot of farmers. We're talking to many farmers every single year. Hemp varieties go south to north, generally speaking, but the northern varieties do not go south. And the US is a very large country with a lot of different geographical zones, and a lot of different weather conditions. So it is important to line up the correct genetics with the right locations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So do you have any other sources you can recommend for folks who want to learn more about seed, and kind of like the history of seed, because it's something I find fascinating, and those just more information on how, country of origin influences growth habit and those sorts of things?
Um, yes, so the USDA germplasm group, based there in New York, has done quite a bit of work on different phenotyping, different genetics, different characteristics of plants.
Shout out Zach
Um,
Stansel.
that's right. Those guys are magnificent researchers. They've done a lot of work up there. We've also worked extensively with Larry Smart over at Cornell. Um, him and Luis have also done a lot of work on hemp genetics. There's a European, what's his name? Dr. Fleischman did a lot of research back in the 40s and 50s. You can find his work out there online as well. The French were doing a tremendous amount of genetic research in the 80s and 90s. A lot of that work is still out there and can be found. Um, and the Netherlands commissioned studies back in the mid 90s as well, for research of hemp genetics for some of that history there. If you're looking at the long history of hemp, it goes back to the Himalayas is where I believe that the plant came from originally, which the Himalayas split China, India, Nepal, and Pakistan. And all of those countries have very, very old hemp genetics still out there. And you can find people who will go out and collect those feral varieties and sell them online. There's a lot of resources out there to learn more about the history of seeds and hemp.
Great. Thank you so much, Robin. This was awesome, and we're looking forward to having you on the Q&A. So now we want to open it up for questions. And what do we think, Shannon? Put them in the chat, or maybe people could raise their hands and then just speak their questions.
Yeah, I think if you did put your question in the chat, we'll try to get to it. But if anyone wants to raise their hand, if you already asked it in the chat, you can also raise your hand and we can get to you that way.
And Robin is with us. Also, Heather is with us. So yeah, hit us with whatever you got.
I did answer a bunch of the soil questions that some folks put in there. Brian, you put in a bunch, so that was great.
Yeah, thank you,
Great,
Heather.
thanks, Heather.
What is? So it looks like somebody's asking about herbicides, maybe. I can't.
Is there any selective herbicide to control weeds?
Yeah, so I can answer that relatively quickly. So as far as weed control with chemicals or herbicides in hemp, it's very, very limited, especially in season, because there's not a lot that has been registered for use on hemp. So generally, any chemical weed control would need to occur prior to the planting of hemp. and folks are using some of those strategies. I would say hemp, generally, if you get a good stand established, and Laura can attest to this, right out of the starting gate, you get good emergence, and the plants start growing quickly. They will generally be able to outcompete any weeds that kind of come their way. And that big one that Laura showed in that image, or somebody showed, maybe it was somebody else's picture. At least for us, a lot of our weeds occur where there's an empty space in the plot or in the alleys or right on the edge. So the trick to weed control is getting that stand out of the ground as soon as possible and having it full. So.
Yep. Planting early. So another question we have is, can all 3 types of hemp be grown on the same farm, or would they adversely affect each other? I'll say we have grown all 3 on the same farm. And yes, I think the CBD crop is generally seeded out by the fiber and grain, meaning that the pollen flows from the fiber and grain trials into the CBD trial and pollinates the flowers, which is what you don't want in your CBD crop. And one possible solution is harvesting fiber early before it goes to seed, which is generally what you want to do for fiber quality anyways. But it is hard to get ahead of any single piece of pollen that might come up on your farm. Would you say so too, Heather?
Yes. Nope, I would say that's a good suggestion. Sorry, I was getting caught up on some other things in the chat.
Okay.
So just a caution to people. There was one herbicide mentioned, which is great. I didn't know about that one, but just make sure it's registered in your state. So even though it may be registered for hemp, it does not mean that you can use it in your state. So I would just check on that. That's really important. You can actually almost buy anything online these days. So just be careful about that. So that's just my suggestion there.
So there's a question about paper making with hemp. And hemp makes really great paper. You can make lots of different quality papers depending on if you're using just bast fiber or bast and hurd, or I don't think you can do just hurd, but in different ratios, if you combine the two, you can get really different qualities. The bast fiber will make more of like paper as we know, as we think of paper, and the hurd will make more like a stiff, rigid particle board that could have numerous other uses. But I would say the best quality paper would be made out of scrap fabric. So hemp that had been turned into textile, and then the scrap waste you can turn into paper, and it makes incredible paper. There was a question for Sarah Mitchell. What varieties are you offering this year?
That was my question.
We will have some fiber and grain varieties available. So yeah, thank you for working with us for all these years. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah.
Sarah's out of King's Agri-Seeds, and she's a really reliable source for hemp, and they also have some flax varieties for those interested.
I saw this question in the chat and I don't think we went over it yet. How easy is it to save seeds from fiber hemp plants?
So seed can be saved. I'm not so sure, Heather, maybe you could speak to about like how well the genetics preserve themselves, or Robin, like, is there a risk of the characteristics being changed if you have a field of like multiple varieties that may have been cross-pollinating? Probably most of our listeners wouldn't be growing too many varieties unless they're doing variety trials like us, but what can you tell us about saving seed?
With our seed, we don't ask for the saving of the seed, so we can control the quality. Cross-pollination is a real deal. Hemp goes a long way, a couple miles. The genetics will morph. So part of the certification is stable morphology, knowing that what you've planted 1 year is what you're going to get the next year as well. But I've met many people who've collected different feral genetics across the country, and tried to make hemp varieties out of those. So, when you're saving a dioecious seed, it's in its natural state. It's going to take a little less selection if you wanted to breed that out. Whereas the monoecious genetics are going to require um, consistent collection of the males and females each year for the crosses.
Yeah, I'll just also add that I think most of the seed suppliers that we work with, we sign MTA agreements with them that we will not save the seed. So it's up to your supplier that you might be contractually not allowed to save seed, but that's not the case for every variety. Is it a crop that needs to be rotated like flax? Yes, I think you can probably get away with a couple years on the same plot, but it does feed on the soil, and you definitely need to fertilize. I know that there's videos from like the early 1900s that say you can like plant hemp on the same spot for 15 years, but that's not true.
Yeah, I concur. I mean, you really have to be careful because, this disease or this plant can get diseases, and though some of them are pretty severe, like white mold as an example. And, constant production in a temperate climate like ours is just going to lead to disease buildup and reduce yields over time. We haven't tried it out so much with hemp, although we do have a study where we're trying to grow hemp on hemp. But we did see it a lot with CBD hemp, just like, more than 2 years was really detrimental to quality and yield. And what crops to rotate with? Well, grass. Corn is actually a pretty good crop. So anything, I want to say non-broadleaf. The longer you can be out of broadleaf crops will help with some of those real critical diseases. But anything other than hemp would be good, and really try to mix it up is what's important. But grass would be a good one, or corn, small grains, anything like that.
So Irma asked about how big should you have your plot to get a sufficient sense of the growth habit? So our plots are 100 square feet. They're 5 by 20. And I wouldn't go too much smaller than that. I think that's a good enough size to get the picture of it. And then someone asked about if they want to grow CBD primarily, is it a good idea to not grow fiber hemp? And yes, that we talked about. Someone asked, can hemp be processed on the same machines as flax? So the answer is yes, but it also depends on how you're growing your hemp. So we'll get into this more in future modules, but there's different ways to manipulate your hemp crop, specifically the size of the plants. And if you want to grow them to process them on machines like flax, you're going to want to grow them like flax. So those will be shorter, you'll have less trees in your fields. And in truth, like it's probably going to be harder on the equipment than a flax crop. So that's something to keep in mind, but you can use flax equipment to process hemp in certain instances. And then we have a question from Nan. Hi, Nan. What states are currently processing hemp into products other than textile? Are there any states currently preparing to bring textile equipment for bast/hemp fiber online? So other than textile, there's definitely people growing for grain. I&D Hemp in Montana are probably the biggest. There's also Victory Hemp Foods. Are they in like the Ohio River Valley, Robin? Kentucky. And so I think the first state that might have a whole scutching line, so hemp primary processing for fiber, for bast fiber, is Pennsylvania. They seem to be moving forward. The Pennsylvania Flax Project is doing really cool things. There's also a flax project in Oregon. And then there are various folks around the country who have decorticating lines. Our closest one is probably at Cornell. And that is a machine that is generally geared towards making different size hurd. So separating out the sizes of hurd for building materials and mulch and other applications there. So we definitely don't have anyone at this time producing line fiber, but there are various people doing hurd things around the country. And that is quite exciting as well. Okay, this is a question I don't know the answer to. So if anyone has it, if you have or own land in a southern US state that presently has a vast and dense number of small timber and brush, how can you assess the land's capacity to be converted to an appropriate farming area with the goal of producing fiber? I think it would take some time for that land to transition from forest to farmland. Heather, do you have any insight on that?
Can you repeat it, Laura? I can't see the question in the chat.
If you have or own land in a southern US state that has a vast and dense number of small timber and brush, how can you assess the land's capacity to be converted to an appropriate farming area towards the end use of fiber?
Okay, so the first thing would be to get a soil map, figure out what the soil type is, and you can actually go out and with your phone, you can download the Web Soil Survey app, and you can use your phone GPS to actually pull up the soil type for wherever you're standing in the country. It's pretty cool. And then that'll give you a lot of information about the soil itself, like, if it's classified as being appropriate for ag or not. It'll tell you a lot about the drainage class, etc. And then somebody else in here mentioned taking a soil test, which would also be the next step after that. So, there would definitely be a lot of steps. I see somebody saying, talk to a county forester, because of course you can't always clear land like you might think you can. So there are a lot of steps, but I think just looking at the soil survey itself and seeing what kind of soil is there and what are different uses for it in that area is the first step.
Okay, you guys, these are really great questions, but we're a bit over time. So I'm just going to wrap us up. This is a recap. Hemp is cannabis with less than 0.3% THC. The main components of the hemp stock are bast and hurd. Hemp bast fiber can be further categorized into line and tow. All constituents of the hemp stock have value. Hemp is direct sown in spring, ideally after last frost. Test and amend your soil before planting. When planted early, it can be expected to outcompete weeds, except for bindweed. Variety selection is very important for end use and will vary depending on your latitude. It is also good to reach a consensus with your buyer or processor when choosing genetics so that expectations are met. and compliance is key to successful growing and processing, and a license must be obtained in advance of planting. Thank you so much for attending. Looking forward to see you all next week, and here's what to expect. We're going to get into planting systems. We'll talk about timing and risk, seeding rates, planting equipment, planting depth and spacing. We'll have a conversation with Steve Groff on his no-till hemp farming, and we'll also have another Q&A. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And if you are
Bye.
interested in getting any CCA credits for this course, I put up the QR code here, and you should be able to scan that if you have the app, or if you don't have the app and you're unable to sign in, you can send the following information to me in my email, which I put in the chat.
We'll hold on to these questions as best we can to get them answered for you guys next week.
Yes. And I think when you exit the meeting, a short survey should come up just to let us know what you're thinking about the course so far, and if there's anything you're really interested in learning about in the coming modules. It should come up when you leave the course, but the survey link is here, and this is a QR code to it as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.